All right. So, do you have any questions about how this goes?
Well, I don't know how it goes, so you can tell me. How is this
All
going?
right. So, I will do introduction and I will do logistics because I pretend we're going to have an audience for this. Um, and I will, St. Jude's Hospital, correct?
Mhm.
Is the charity to highlight tonight. Essentially, you are the star. I am just here to be your color announcer and like second chef. So uh, I'll turn it over to you. First question I always ask is, what are you drinking?
Ah, I'm drinking brewed ginger beer.
Okay, so I'll ask you that. Um, and uh, and then just basically go through it. Don't go too quickly. Say what you're doing. Give me space to be able to like interject or ask questions because I'll ask things like, why did you choose this recipe? What does this mean to you? Have you seen different ways to do this?
Hmm.
Who are you? Like I'll talk about the fact that of course you and I have known each other for forever.
Like a
Um,
million years.
a million
So
years.
long.
Um, that's why I look like Moses. Um, and yeah. Um, And we were really excited to get to do that engagement with your team. Um,
We were pretty excited too. I've been meaning to find something that we were ready for, let alone, because I know that there's a whole host of things. It's just where are we and what are we ready for? Just like the introduction I made to Disney, they weren't ready.
yep.
And they didn't even respond. Like, I got nothing, not even crickets, just a big old, you
Well,
know.
they're going through a reorg.
Well, yeah, there is all that, but it's also just, it's just politics. It's the I don't work there anymore, so I have no access to anybody. And the people that used to mentor me, they only mentored me because I was important enough in Disney to pay attention to. And once I didn't work there anymore, I don't exist, which is fine.
I understand. So we were glad to get to do that. We've really enjoyed those kinds of engagements with multiple customers because until we started doing these kinds of things the past sort of 3-4 months, people would kind of be like, well, how do customers use your platform? And we'd be like we don't really know because they'd buy the platform and then they disappear. When we go and get to run the platform and like go through the whole
Now you
cycle,
know, like this
we
is
learn so
great.
much.
Mhm.
So that's been cool. And then we're really excited, of course, if you do become like a customer, because then the lessons that you'll learn from that and having us been in your environment and all those things, just, I think it really like, it's a really nice cycle. We like it.
For sure. Well, I put it into our budget. It's just a matter of what gets approved. Coronavirus sort of throws things into a bit of a
We,
question mark.
we are well aware. Um, okay, you ready?
Sure? Are you ready?
I'm always ready.
Awesome.
You have to understand, I've done this a lot.
I know, I get it. I don't do this though, and I'm an
I know, Cynthia, I go through this with every chef every time. They come in, they got a little bit of butterflies. They're like, well, how does this really gonna work? And I mean, I understand. I have a lot of experience with dealing with each one of you who this is your first time doing it. I've now done it a lot, so I've really got a good feel for like how things work and what works and what doesn't work. And there have been shows that are not that great because the chef on the other side just kind of like, but that's fine. That's the way it is. All right, let's go.
Let's go.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Unicorn Chef. Today's Unicorn Chef is a very special unicorn who is probably one of the people who has known me the longest of almost anybody that's still in my life. Cynthia and I go back all the way to cadets at West Point, where she was a year ahead of me. So we've now known each other for almost a quarter of a century. I know, it's crazy. And we've remained steadfast friends through a whole lot and still friends today, which is why I'm really excited to have her on the show. In fact, no, you don't know Vic. I was about to say, one of my really good friends is getting promoted to full bird tomorrow.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I've known him for 2 decades. So Today's charity is St. Jude's Hospital. So the link is in the registration page as always, and I'll make sure to add it in on the YouTube video if that's probably where you're watching this. Cynthia, what are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking Trader Joe's brewed ginger beer tonight. It's quite spicy.
I am drinking a local brew. There's a place out in Ashburn called Lost Rhino. The name of it's called a Face Plant, and it's an IPA. So, Unicorn Chef, take us away.
Good evening, everybody. I am going to walk you through cooking a sounds like intimidating dish, but really it's pretty easy. It's Greek lamb with lemon, a rice pilaf that has almonds and mushrooms, and roasted Brussels sprouts, because I really like Brussels sprouts and I wanted a reason to cook them. For this recipe, we're going to start with the lamb marinade because it takes the longest. And then we're going to cook the rice dish because the cooking part for the rice takes the longest. For the lamb marinade, you're going to need garlic. You're going to need a lemon. You're going to need oregano. And you're going to need really good olive oil. I cannot stress the importance of the good stuff for this recipe. This is not a low-fat food. In addition, I recommend that you also have salt and pepper because everyone's taste is different. And for me personally, I like to add a dash of salt and pepper to my marinades because it adds a little bit of depth. For the rice dish, you're going to need a few more ingredients, but I think we'll start with the marinade and then we'll move on to the rice dish. So first, I recommend cleaning and trimming your lamb. I already did that a little bit earlier, and then putting it into a dish where it can be evenly coated with the olive oil. There you go. Thank you for my practical demonstrator over there. So you start with coating it with the olive oil. Make sure you get an even coating. Be generous. I usually use 1/4 to 1/2 cup. Next, you add the juice of 1 whole lemon. Once you get the juice of the lemon and the olive oil in there, what I would do is I would crush a couple of cloves of garlic. You can really be generous here. I usually use 2 to 4. Toss that in. Add a pinch of salt.
On this show, we don't believe there's anything as too much garlic.
No, not really. However, some people don't have a lot of garlic or, they worry. So giving an estimate, you cannot go wrong with garlic. Once you've added a little dash of salt and pepper to your lemon olive oil mixture, then this is kind of the special ingredient. I would add a couple of teaspoons of fresh oregano or a tablespoon of dried oregano. Fresh goes further. It has much more oil in it, so it gives a better flavor. So once you get that all put together, and I came prepared, so it kind of looks like that for me without dumping it over. Just go ahead and set that aside where it can all get together and be nice to each other.
Yeah, I have a pretty extensive herb garden, but what I do not have is oregano.
You have dried?
I have dried, yes.
Okay, dried works.
Yeah, I'm gonna make a few modifications to the rice the way you're doing it, but yeah, no, this I'm gonna stick to your recipe.
So the rice pilaf, to be honest, is what I came up with for you, or in my house anyway. It's really pretty typical to have leftover rice or cooked rice, because for one person, it's really hard to make a cup of rice. Most of the time you make 2, and then you end up with a whole cup later left over in the fridge, and then it gets dry, and then you don't know what to do with it. Well, this is what to do with it. To mimic having cooked rice in the fridge, I actually have these really tasty Tamaki Gold short grain rice, pre-cooked, microwavable rice servings. Usually you'd want to use long grain rice, but really rice pilaf tastes good whatever the grain of the rice. It's just with a short grain rice, it's going to be more sticky, which isn't too much of a problem. You just add more olive oil. So if you have leftover rice that is not pre-cooked, throw it in the microwave for 90 seconds and then set it aside. I put it in the microwave already because I didn't want to make noise while we were on this show. So we're going to set it aside and get started on the next part. Okay, now comes the fun part. Heat your oven to medium high, sorry, your stove to medium high, and get a nice saucepan. I would recommend a cast iron, but if you don't have a cast iron, just a non-stick or a large enough skillet where you can throw a bunch of things in and grill them up and then toss the rice on top. Everything that we do from here on out is going to be on the stove in a couple of pans. While the stove is heating up, grab that really good olive oil and throw a couple of tablespoons in the pan. Obviously, I'm not going to measure it. I just eyeball it, but I give it a good healthy coating. The olive oil should give a thin coat to the bottom of the pan as you rotate it around. You should probably not drip it on the floor like I just did.
So why'd you pick this dish?
I wanted something that was easy, but also a little exotic. Something that might intimidate some people, but it's really good to pull out when you have a surprise guest. Most people have some sort of red meat in the fridge if they're meatitarians. If you're not, then you don't. But I'm a meatitarian, so I usually have some kind of red meat, be it a steak or lamb or bison. And you can make this dish with any red meat. Lamb is what it's designed for, but really all of these flavors work well with any dark meat.
I like that we chose lamb because I think Americans don't eat very much lamb.
That may be true. I haven't spent all that much time living here in the last couple of decades, but my palate is pretty broad. And I also think lamb is an underrated meat. It's quite good. Okay, so the next thing we want to do while the oil heats up is, again, go to your garlic. Smash a couple of garlic cloves, 2 or 3, maybe 4, be generous, and chop up 2 shallots. I already did that, so I'm going to tell you to do that, and then I'm going to toss it in the pan and look cool.
And as always, you can use onions if you do not have shallots.
You can use an extra garlic and a small onion.
That's what I did. I added some yellow peppers to mine because yellow peppers were on sale at the grocery store.
That's awesome. Actually, to be honest, rice pilaf is one of those refrigerator dishes. You open the refrigerator, whatever you have, that goes in the dish.
That's 50% of my cooking. It's like, what do I got? That's
a lot of my cooking too. I feel like that's a lot of single person cooking or working person cooking, to be honest, because most people now work crazy hours, even if they're at home, because there's no delineation between the office and home.
Yeah. Well, and I have a finicky teenager, so half the time she doesn't eat what I make anyway.
That is true. Okay, so what you want to go for is you want to toast the things in the pan. I'm going to move you over here so I can see you while I cook. You might not be able to see my pan, but I can see you. Hey, look at that. Okay, so I have it on medium-high, and we're getting it to where the onions and the garlic and everything, and the shallots or whatever you stuck in here, start to be really aromatic. A lot of people say wait till it gets translucent, but how are you going to tell? Most of the time you can't really tell unless you're really, really looking at it under good light. So what I do is I listen, and as the water starts to cook out of it, the actual sound of it changes, and it smells really good. But when you start smelling the combination of everything together instead of the individual ingredients, it's a good time to add the next thing. Well, what is the next thing? I'm glad you asked. So the next thing in this is your almonds. So we have about ½ a cup of almond slivers, and you want to toast those. You want to add that nut flavor. And since I'm not making the rice from scratch, I'm not adding the rice here. If this was a from scratch rice pilaf, you would want to add your rice grains here so that they can get coated in the fat and toast with the almonds. But so again, since I'm not doing that.
I'm using pistachios.
Well, pistachios are amazing, but I had almonds, so that's what I'm using. So give that a nice turn in the oil. And what we're looking for at this point is you're looking for everything to start to brown. You don't want it to get black, and you definitely don't want it to be all completely browned and dehydrated, but you want it to start to toast. This is my favorite part of cooking because everything starts smelling amazing like right now.
Yeah, I know, and then you get hungry, and then you wait, it's another 20 minutes to eat.
Another thing you can add that I find to be really good for adding depth is a pinch of thyme and a bay leaf. You don't need these things, just like if you have sage in the house, you can add sage, and that goes really well with lamb consequentially. But I had some thyme, so I'm going to toss in some thyme, and I'm going to toss in a bay leaf.
You're tossing thyme into the pilaf?
I put it in the pilaf.
Okay.
Yes, just a pinch.
Because I have sage that I got from my garden.
Sage is perfect. The thing is you're just trying to add just a little bit of that alkali herb taste because it really balances the fatty rice taste and the oil from the nuts and everything out. And it just adds a little depth to the dish. It's not needed, but it's kind of nice to have. Okay, everything's starting to toast here. It starts to toast. It's time to add your optional ingredients. In my case, my optional ingredients are mushrooms, about a ½ cup of mushrooms, and these little Persian red berries, which are really neat. They're kind of like cranberries if cranberries were really tiny and not as tart, and some raisins. Because I like Moroccan spices and flavorings, so I'm adding a little bit of that.
So I used figs from that I had harvested from my tree and apricots.
Figs are awesome. That's really good. So this is going to be sweet savory rice. So give that a few turns. The important part here is to just make sure that there's an even coating of oil on everything before you get to the next step. It looks pretty good. Smells pretty good too. All right. Once you've got everything coated in the oil, now comes the part that takes all the time. About a ½ cup of broth. I use chicken broth. You can also use beef or mushroom. Now, because my rice is cooked, I want to make sure that I let the broth cook off quite a lot before I add the rice, because what I don't want is for the rice to end up mushy. That's kind of the pro tip here is, for me, I'm eyeballing it, but really you don't want everything soaking in water or broth at this point. You want it to boil a little bit or simmer a little bit until it's about half simmered away. I guess you call that reduction. Mm-hmm. You're being fancy. So right now, I'll simmer it for maybe 2 or 3 minutes at a medium heat, just so that a lot of the water has cooked away and you're left with just flavor. If you're a tasting cook like I am, which means you taste a lot of your cooking, this is a good time to taste it and see if there's enough salt, pepper, whatever. Or you can wait till it reduces so you get the concentrated flavor before you add too much salt. So while that's doing that, the next thing that we're going to make is the Brussels sprouts. And we're going to probably make that in a saucepan about the same size. So you can start setting that up. That means turn it on. Hit the right burner. Turn on the front burner.
Brussels sprouts are one of those vegetables I feel like everybody of our generation grew up hating because our parents did them terribly. And then now it's like one of the vegetable du jours because of course we all saute them and get that nice like caramelization on the bottom and they're just amazing.
It's just that our parents wrecked them. Like, who boils vegetables? To death. To death. Like, to death. My mother is an amazing cook except for vegetables.
Except for vegetables? Like
except for like, we were growing up, we grew up in a pretty poor house, but we got all these canned vegetables, which are already pretty soft, and then she would boil them like forever.
When I lived in Moscow, you couldn't get fresh vegetables. So
no.
When we moved there, we imported hundreds of pounds of dehydrated vegetables that my mother brought with us. And so for 2 years, I lived on reconstituted vegetables and powder milk.
Yeah, and then you're like, what is this white stuff that's liquid? I don't understand. I don't have to add water to it, and it tastes good. Although I have to say, as a result of some of that, I like condensed milk in my coffee. It's
not condensed milk. It's powder milk.
I know, but we had condensed milk, and it was pretty darn good.
No, condensed milk, to me, was like sweeter. I really hated powdered milk because I can still like taste that grit.
The grains?
Yeah, I would always drink my milk and there'd be grit in it. And I'd be like, ah! Why can't I have real milk? But there wasn't real milk. It wasn't available.
Yep.
You know?
So as you move the contents of your pan around, I don't know what to call this, you should see the liquid not able to cover the bottom of the pan anymore. That's when you know you're about ready to put in the rice. And so 2 cups of cooked rice tossed into this mixture. And this is where the tasting really becomes important. I recommend separating out the grains so that they all get evenly mixed up with all the other ingredients, or you end up with like lumpy pilaf, and nobody likes lumpy pilaf. It's like lumpy oatmeal. Nobody talks about it. It's horrible. It's just...
We, in my house growing up, we called that galapata.
Nasty. My dad was amazing at making oatmeal. Like, you couldn't find a lump if you tried. It was buttery and just perfect. Like, he was the only person allowed to make breakfast on Sunday because he got it right. Everybody else, nope, out of the kitchen, not allowed. I couldn't really make oatmeal the way he did, but I made scratch pancakes. That was my thing. And now I have celiac, so the only people I can make scratch pancakes are not me. Mm. How's it tasting?
Good.
So I've almost got all the grains separated. It looks pretty good. It looks like I might almost know what I'm doing. At this point, your oil in the other pan is hot. So when you have a spare hand, after you stir up your rice pilaf, you're going to want to let it cook off some of the excess moisture and maybe toast on the bottom if you want to do advanced math. That's almost mixed. You're going to, I recommend, grab your Brussels sprouts and toss them into the oil. Brussels sprouts, I recommend also putting a couple of pinches of salt and pepper just to give it a little bite. And you can also add garlic. This is one of those dishes that garlic is very friendly. Generally speaking, I put in a couple of cloves of garlic with my Brussels sprouts. And I let them get good and toasted on each side.
So you mentioned to the audience how you've been around the world mostly for the last 2 decades.
Pardon?
Where have you been? Where have you been the last 2 decades? What are some of the countries you've lived in?
79 different countries in 20 years. Not too bad. I got a chance to work for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and I joined the Army to travel and make sure that I got to do so. And then I worked for a couple international companies, and then nobody really wanted to travel. So I was like, pick me, I'll go. And they did, and I went. And it was awesome. And that's amazing. You should taste this. It's pretty good.
Just put some in an envelope, send it my way.
Mm-hmm. That's the challenge with cooking. I can't hear anything.
Reminder for all of you at home, as always, hashtag Unicorn Chef. We'd love to see what you create too when you make this. So please do that so Cynthia and I can see how yours looks. Someday we'll get to taste it in real life.
That'd be awesome. Okay, so what I'm doing right now is, because my Brussels sprouts are shredded rather than just cut in half, I'm making sure that none of them burn because their surface area is really big and they're really thin. The goal is to just let them be caramelized and toasty. For me personally, I like them crunchy. You might like them a little softer. So moderate your temperature and the length of time you cook as you see fit. And they go with everything. One of the things I like about Brussels sprouts the most is when I'm done eating them with a main meal as a side, I just throw them in a salad because they add a lot of texture and flavor to whatever salad I'm eating. Okay, and the rice pilaf is almost uniformly colored and tasting good. I'm going to let it cook just a little longer so that it gets a bit crispy on the bottom. It's kind of a Mediterranean thing to have crisp texture with your soft texture.
Yeah, we did paella a couple of months ago with the tahini, and that was, of course, the key element was leaving the rice to sit at the bottom so you get that crust.
Mm-hmm. Well, since I need to get a new spoon, I tasted this one. Good thing I have two. That's the other thing about cooking for one. You don't have to worry about somebody else sharing germs.
When are we getting to this lamb?
In just a minute. As soon as the Brussels sprouts are done, and they're done, what we're going to do is we're going to swap them out and then use the same pan because I am not a panaholic. I don't have a lot of pans. Okay, they are going into a bowl. You know, my $5 cast iron pan is still my favorite pan.
There's my Brussels sprouts, looking pretty.
They look gorgeous. I don't think mine look that pretty, but they taste good.
I love cast iron skillets. I mean, again, 10, 15 bucks, you get a chunk of iron, and as long as you take care of it, it will do whatever you need.
It'll last forever. I mean, there's
Yeah,
really
I've had
nothing
this
to
one
it.
for at least 10 years. I have
Yeah,
come
it's
and gone
amazing.
with all the other pots. That skillet stays.
Mm-hmm.
It's a survivor.
So, Brussels sprouts. Another thing you can do, finishing touches, you can add lemon zest and a squeeze of lemon with some sea salt to your Brussels sprouts just as you serve them, just for just a spike of flavor. And I find it to be quite good to do little touches like that. These ones I'm tossing with a little bit of cilantro and lemon juice later, right before I serve them. Okay, pan is clear. Since there is so much olive oil and everything in the marinade, I don't need to really add more olive oil to the pan. And since I just used it to cook, it's hot. So what we want to do here, because this is basically bean cooking in the lemon juice and the olive oil, is you want to have a hot pan and you want to sear it. Now, for me, I have 3 temperatures in my kitchen. I have rare, medium rare, and get out of my kitchen. So I'm probably going to cook these medium rare. Again, you moderate your temperature and your time of cooking for your taste. All right, here we go. Work. That moment when you lay everything out except for the fork. Okay, I use loin chops, so these are not going to cook as quick as a bone-in chop, but they should still cook pretty fast.
Yeah, I have very thinly cut chops. But my pan isn't at the temperature I want it yet, so you got a head start on me.
I wish the volume on my computer went louder. All right, so that's cooking, and the rice is about as crisp as I'm going to have it. So for the rice, I just leave it in the pan, shut off the top, and let it rest. It might grill a little more on the bottom depending on if you have an electric or a gas stove. Mine is gas. But right now, you turn it off, you can't do any harm to it, and it'll just taste better by the time you serve it up. So cooking the lamb just takes a little patience. I don't know what patience is. So I often have to turn it a couple of times, but ideally you only turn it once. So you put it in a real hot pan. It's wet because of the marinade. So the hotter the pan, the better it will sear, and that will keep the flavors inside.
So my trick for searing is I flip every 30 seconds. So that way I don't get the temperature too much on any particular side. So I just keep moving it.
Mm-hmm. That's a good tip. Pro tip from Bryce and Bork. Trademark. So the trouble with cooking all this stuff is I'm hungry right now.
Yeah, no, every show I do, we get about halfway in, and even if I've had a snack beforehand to prevent it, I get hungry because just all the
I'm
aromas
trying to
and
peel off
everything,
though. I can't.
looking at it and looking at the other food, and I just get, yes, every time.
Mm. And each person that does this is going to find that they like a different flavoring. I like to taste the ingredients, so I don't really add a lot of salt and pepper. But you might find that you like the saltiness with the tartness and the sweetness. But the different variegated ingredients that you put in your rice pilaf will really give it character. So 2 minutes on this side, and it should be done. I recommend letting any meats that you cook rest for about 5 minutes, just so that all the juices go back into the meats. I suppose we shocked it. Now we have to let it get over the trauma before we then eat it.
How's yours coming along? Where you at?
Almost done. It might actually be done. I'm just trying to get a little bit of the lemon juice from the lemon I had left over into my Brussels sprouts. Okay. If you want your meat more well done, but you don't necessarily want to cook it more on the surface, what I normally do is I have a hot oven, about 425, and you can put it into the oven for another 5 to 10 minutes to finish the inside. Although again, I like mine medium rare, so take that for what it's worth. Okay, the lamb is done. I'm going to rest it for about 5 minutes, and then we'll be ready to plate it.
All right. So what's on your mind these days?
Well, quite a lot. I've got all the hobbies, and then my company just announced that they acquired another company that does an adjacent product, and so they don't have any security people, and I get to, heck, yeah, they don't have any security people, so I get to figure out what that looks like from a strategic
You get to figure out what they bought.
Yeah. So that's kind of trippy, but that is definitely on my mind right now.
Don't you like doing that afterwards? Like, okay, now what do we got?
Well, technically I knew about it before, but I wasn't supposed to, so I had to pretend that I didn't know. And then they announced it, and they're like, okay, it's okay for you to know now. And I was like, great, can I do something about it now? And they're like, wait. And so we had our first meeting, and then they're like, how soon can you get this done? I was like, well, you told me 6 months ago when I didn't know about it. Like, oh yeah, about that. We need you to be done like tomorrow. Is that okay? Can you do?
So you have to explain to everybody, what do you do?
Okay, well, what I do for a living is I run all of the technical security soup to nuts for a software as a service firm that creates financial close software. What that means in layman's terms is every public company has to produce financial statements. And those financial statements have to accurately portray how much they earn and how much they lose. They have to be accurate as to assets, liabilities, profit and loss, and all that stuff. Well, we build a software that automates that makes it a lot easier for companies to come to those results faster. Right now, it's a significant emotional event every month and every quarter and every end of year, because it takes hundreds of hours for many people to manually do these things in Excel spreadsheets and things that are pretending to not be Excel spreadsheets. But what we provide is a way to keep track of all of those transactions and reconcile that end of month and end of quarter, so people could do it continuously. They could go on vacation, hit go, because it's cloud-based, and actually get an accurate answer that's auditable. And it's pretty neat. And it's a really small company that has a disproportionately large market share, which is great. And it's scary because the information that we have is pretty important. So I'm pretty lucky, and I like the challenges that we have. It's an interesting problem to solve. I'm going to plate this, so I'll be right back.
All right. Well, I hope everybody at home is enjoying this. Had some good questions along the way. And I'm very excited to eat.
Does it look good? Because it looks good over here.
Yeah, it does. I'm ready for our plating picture, and then, of course, to dig in. I think it's really cool that I get to have a really old friends on to do this. And I look forward to having more friends on. And then of course, those of you at home, a number of the unicorn chefs that have come on, I picked off of them sharing their, them cooking what we make. And so when I see those and I see repeated examples of where they clearly can demonstrate that they're into this, I reach out and invite them on the show. All right, so we're ready to close out the show with our Let's Time to Eat. Cynthia, you got to get in the picture. You're a part of this. Hold on. And ready? Okay. So, Cynthia, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been good to see you again, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
Donate to the St. Jude's Hospital. The link will be in the video. And #UnicornChef. See you next week.
Bye.